Confession number 1. I rarely tell people what I do for a living, at least not when I first meet them. I actively avoid questions around, what do you do for a living? For one, I just don't view people's identity existing simply in their work. For another, I shove my professional life deep in the closet. Now, I'm not embarrassed or ashamed to be an associate pastor. In fact, I'm very proud of that title. My avoidance to confessing to folks that I'm a pastor comes from a fear of one simple question. How can you be a Christian pastor despite everything? It's the everything that hits me the hardest every time. Because we know Christian religion is responsible for horrible stuff. Centuries of violence, assault, oppression, genocide, colonization, war crimes, and exploitation lay on the table of church history. Inheriting this history and its present reality is brutal and disheartening on a good day. Confession number 2. When I'm really honest with myself and with y'all, I want God to be Zeus and Jesus to be Superman. I want the Holy One to throw lightning bolts at my enemies, and the Messiah to be able to fly around to my aid and kick all of the villains' asses. I want Jesus to shoot lasers from his eyes and see through lies and walls. I want a God who is faster than a speeding bullet, who can fly to our rescue when she hears our cries with supersonic hearing, and who can defeat all the monsters that come our way. That God sure sounds comforting, even if it doesn't match our reality. As we know, bad stuff happens. Calls in the middle of the night happen. Needless wars happen. Devastating medical news happens. And I know I'm not the only one who wants a God who swoops in and saves the day. What I don't want is to look throughout Christian history and see the plethora of ways God's people have struggled, wept, and hurt other people using God's name. Confession number 3. I am a huge Billy Joel fan. I will drown out a panic attack by blasting Vienna, Piano Man, or scenes from an Italian restaurant. After Natalie let me know that I'd be preaching on Pentecost, it was Joel's 1989 hit, We Didn't Start the Fire. I see that head nod, Jeff. We Didn't Start the Fire that took root in my head. Inspiration for the song, in case you didn't know, came after Joel turned 40. He was in the recording studio when a 21-year-old named Sean Lennon lamented, "It's a terrible time to be 21. Joel replied, "Yeah, I remember when I was 21. I thought it was an awful time. We had Vietnam and, drug problems and civil rights problems, and everything just seemed to be awful." Lennon replied, yeah, but it was different for you. You were a kid in the 50s, and everybody knows that nothing happened in the 50s. So of course, Joel did not like that comeback. But despite all the critics claiming, including Billy Joel himself, that the We Didn't Start the Fire was his worst song, it's actually my favorite. As Joel maps out 118 historical figures and events between 1948 and 1989, we hear his iconic bridge, "We didn't start the fire. It was always burning since the world's been turning. We didn't start the fire, but we didn't light it, but we will try to fight it." And y'all, if this isn't a song for us on Pentecost, then I don't know what is. As the flames of the Spirit descended, people weren't met with an answer to all of the pain or the end to their suffering. Instead, they were met with an all-consuming fire that breaks the shackles of oppression through an inclusive love that radically questions our human version of freedom. They were met with flames like tongues proclaiming, "We didn't start the fire. We didn't light it, but we sure are trying to fight it." Confession 4. I firmly believe in the power of beloved community. The beloved community is a term that was first coined in the early days of the 20th century by the philosopher-theologian Josiah Royce, who founded the Fellowship of Reconciliation. However, it was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., also a member of the Fellowship of Reconciliation, who popularized the term and invested it with deeper meaning and ended up capturing the imagination of people of goodwill all over the world. Dr. King's beloved community is a global vision in which all people can share in the wealth of the world. In the beloved community, poverty, hunger, homelessness will not be tolerated because international standards of human decency will not allow it. Racism and all forms of discrimination, bigotry, and prejudice will be replaced with an all-inclusive spirit of familial bonds or kinship. In the beloved community, international disputes will be resolved by peaceful conflict resolution and reconciliation rather than military might. Love and trust will triumph over fear and hatred. In a world where power and might wins, we have inherited a story about a seemingly powerless God whose testimony is that they loved too radically for the world and the world decided to silence them. And while it may seem that this God is meaningless, illogical, or too weak to function, I see a God who knew the worst humanity had to offer, who also sees every single person as worthy of the divine's mercy and grace. Maybe that's the divine's kryptonite after all, their love for us humans. So maybe Jesus' valor didn't look like a knight riding a white stallion, but instead looked like a poor man standing up to the Roman Empire and saying, "My love is stronger than death." The story that we are inheriting as church folk is the story of a strong man who entered into the stadium owning the reality that they very well could lose, but choosing to fight and love anyway. This faith, hope, and love is my religion. A spirituality rooted in the real stories of the struggles and yearnings of humanity. It's a religion that I see in the lives of each of you, a reckless hope for a better way. So to the question, how can I be a Christian pastor with everything? I do not accept that Christianity is only the sum of its worst parts. Nor will I let the church off the hook for the ways that its violence has, is, and will continue to cause harm. The reality is, church is messy and full of messy people. My name is at the top of that list. And while it's hella unfair to inherit a history and a legacy brimming with horror and pain, my Pentecost prayer for us is that we hear the message of the biblical prophet Joel proclaiming, "In the last days it will be, God declares, that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams." And I pray that we respond to the horrors of our world with the same reckless dreaming of the prophetic rocker Billy Joel by saying, "We didn't start the fire. It was always burning since the world's been turning." No, we didn't start the fire, but we are fighting it. For the sake of the holy, beloved community, of everyone in these pews, in the virtual world, and around the world in general, may we commit to this, standing in truth, refusing to be ignorant to the harm that we have caused, willing to be held accountable and grow, and ultimately choosing love and peace over violence and war. May it be so. Amen.